of experience. She currently chairs the Department of Apparel, Merchandising and Design at St. Catherine University. Her sustainable design collections have been showcased by the Minnesota History Center and Kathy G. Murphy Gallery. Let us meet the proud recipient of Bonnie Jean Kelly and John Kelly Awards for Faculty Experience at St. Catherine University, ITAA Nancy Rutherford Teaching Innovation Award, and AACF National Achiever Award, and MACF Minnesota State New Achiever Award. She has even published more than 100 scholarly works, including journal articles, book chapters, book reviews, and has juried design exhibit abstracts and conference proceedings as well. So let's welcome our speaker for today. So Dr. Anupama, I would hand it over to you for the further session, and again, welcome you to the session.
Thank you so much. Everybody can hear me? If nobody's saying anything, I would assume that. So first of all, good evening at your end and good morning at my end here. And I'm honored to be here with you, and I thank JD Institute for inviting me. And I'm thankful for all of you, because I know that, nobody wants to sit in a session, but then, you all have chosen to be here. So I'm really thankful for you guys. And then I also have a very old connection with JD Institute, because I think several years ago, I think 25, 30 years ago, I even taught a textiles class one term at JD Institute. So long, long time ago. So thank you very much.
So Anupama ma'am, to start with the session and to know a bit more about sustainability, so I would want to know what is your take on that, and what according to you is sustainability, because that is something which we hear a lot these days all around us. So I think it's very, very important to know what actually sustainability means.
All right. So before I answer your question, I want to just kind of give a little bit of background that which Indu has done. She said a lot of good things about me, and all of you would be there, because it's like so many years I had to do all that work. So everybody, can be doing those things. I also, I'm the executive director of the Educators for Socially Responsible Apparel Practices, and that's another non-profit, just like a volunteer-based group that works towards making sure that we are making that change from within. So we are trying to change the curriculum, have students, embrace the sustainability, and that's happening all across the world now, not only US or Europe, but you see that how much, India has moved towards sustainability. And we were, as a country, we were sustainable in many ways. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to learn. Other countries have to learn from us because of how we were sustainable, and we are still sustainable in those areas. So kind of going here, and before I again move on, I wanted to just recognize that where we are in the world today, so kind of giving some context about it. First of all of us are stuck at home, right, with a pandemic, and this pandemic has on our face given us that what is the climate change doing to us, what things that we were not thinking about earlier, and we were just going with the development. We just want to grow and progress, and without thinking through what we are doing to accomplish that. And that's where there's a lot of connection between our actions as human beings, how we have tried to overpower the earth and its natural systems. And obviously that's in the industrialization, the being digital, going technology, everything, how we just jump onto those things and don't want to stay behind, like fear of staying behind, and we don't think about those things. But that's where there's a connection between having this pandemic and how it's spread. I think there's a lot of connection about that lack of biodiversity, and the global warming, and all those things are connected. So I think this pandemic has created more opportunity to view that clearly, that that's what's happening, that all of these problems that we are facing are part of our actions. So as I've mentioned, loss of biodiversity, that's a huge one for us. And then also this pandemic and then other events which started in US, but if you look at Indian context as the caste system, all those things are also bringing forward the racism. In US it's called racism, but again, how we do not treat each individual the same respect is another aspect that's challenging for the apparel industry, challenging for in general the equity in the world. Which is, if you look at the graphic here, this is about the 17 goals, UN, the sustainable development goals. So all these colors represent that. So basically eradicating poverty, and all those pieces are part of this systemic problems that are happening within the industry and across in the society. And then it is, as I've already mentioned, about the poverty and everything, and then the impact is different about how you as a student is being influenced by whether it's pandemic or how the industry is facing these challenges. But the person who's working behind those, making your clothes, or the artisan that's making the craft, how they are being impacted, what kind of health, what kind of well-being is around in their communities. So everybody's getting impacted in a very different way, which you don't even realize at this point of time, that how for you it is just sitting at home. Maybe for some we are losing our jobs, but for them it is that was their livelihood, so it's really hard. However, the positive side of it is that at this point of time, majority 60%, I would call, if it's more than 50%, I can call it majority, is industry is ready for it. It's geared, it has the right timing is right, and they're thinking, and it's all coming from us, like as consumers we are asking those questions, and there are a lot of factors that have gone in. So that is really becoming important, that we are asking the impact of the industry, and industry has things in place. They may not be to its most efficient system, but they are thinking about it, and they're thinking because that's their business. It's a wise business decision. Everyone is not thinking because it's coming from their heart or they really are very conscientious. They are also thinking from the business aspect of it. So kind of moving forward to what the actual question was. So so I like this definition a lot because it resonates with how I think of sustainability. And both Connie and Connie Ulasovics and Janet Hithon, they're very close friends, and they're part of the SRAB group that I am the director of. So they helped me build this knowledge and build this group. So as it says, through the development and use of a thing or a process, so not only the product, but how we make it or whatever we do, there's no harm done to the people and to the ecosystem, and then to the planet. So you're thinking of all pieces of it. And then once you do those things, it can enhance the well-being. So not only you're not causing harm, but you're also doing good. So kind of thinking for not just I don't have to do anything bad. That's just, that's common sense. But how I can make it better, and how the environment around me can be better. So how we can think about, like, if I produce a garment today, how it can give livelihood to people, how it can create more cleaner air, or so in some way we have to go into the innovative systems where we can start thinking of how our water can be more clean, how we can give access to water. So whatever we do, we have to think through a different, newer, innovative lens, like how we can change those things. And we do have technologies, we have a lot of enablers in place right now, so the timing is right. Anybody has any questions for the definition, feel free to put that in the text for Indu, and she can communicate, because I'm not watching the chat section here. So kind of, again, all this we need to look from the systems lens and the design thinking. And I've already mentioned about the 17 SDGs, or the development goals, and the 4 dimensions, which a lot of times if you look at all the graphics, it's always about the triple bottom line, which is a term coming from the marketing, right? Elkington's triple bottom line, which was profit, planet, and so I won't go in detail into that, but I want to add that the 4th dimension was added later into the dimensions. So in the 2030 goal, the cultural piece is there, which is not part of a clear part of this. It was embedded into the people's aspect of it, but again, having that culture, especially for communities like countries where the cultural artifacts and artisans is really important. So that becomes really important in the developing countries where uh, the culture and the preservation of culture, the artisan work, that becomes really important. And how we, and even the cultural appropriation for certain communities. So all those pieces come in that, empowering those individuals who are part of this whole fashion supply chain, but they may not have that kind of autonomy, power, or equal access to the benefits of the fashion system. I also like Rahul Mishra. He's like one of my favorite designers for his philosophy, Gandhian philosophy, So he also talks about 4 E's: environment, employment, and enabling. And I think I really like that enabling term. And then there's another trendy term, but very valuable, is about circularity. I think all of you must have heard of it. So that's mainly focused on the environment. If you really look at the circular, which we'll talk a little bit later, doesn't have that people dimension or the social responsibility piece of it. So we'll talk about that, but then it's really focused on how we can stop that damage that we are causing to the environment and how we can make it better. So, Indu, do you have another question for me?
Yes, ma'am, lots of them. And so that's wonderful that this is the take on sustainability, because that is something which is very much required these days, as I said in the beginning. So what's your opinion that how do we achieve this sustainable aspect? That how the ways, or what are the different techniques that we can achieve sustainability? So if you can guide us on that.
Absolutely. And as for rest of you, obviously I had some of these questions ahead of time. So my slides were tried to prepare those in that way. So that must, that's why it's synchronized in some way here. So, um, so I'm going to give you, obviously, what I'm going to present about ways to achieve sustainability is not everything. It's not exhaustive. It is some of the means that I think I have known more, or I have some expertise on. But but again, as a young mind, and when you're learning, there could be many different other ways that we may not even think. So I think we look at your generation to give us more ideas, here, because you are the change makers. So you have all that power. So I'll go over some of this. So first of all, I think it's very important that we are having this conversation here. So education and awareness, that's a big part of it. Not just us in the fashion, but also people who are wearing the fashion, because everyone wears clothes, right? That's one of our basic necessities, that we have to protect ourselves, and we have to be modest and everything. So we are wearing clothes, and it's important for every consumer to understand that, and how we communicate them through our brands, or through the labels on our garments, or howsoever we want to communicate that. Talk to people in our sphere of influence, like your family, your friends, talking about those things and having those conversations in your extracurricular, wherever you want to do that, because it is so important. This industry is, as you know, second largest polluter, and it's got huge impact, economic impact. And so we need to have that conversation. They need to know. They cannot just keep wearing things without thinking about it. So that's important. So as far as how we can achieve, one obviously is the design strategy. So one is a sustainable design. Then is the material, which is also part of the sustainable. When you think about sustainable design, you have to think holistically. So, materials is just one aspect, but again, thinking through the materials that you're picking up, right from not just the fabric, but all other things, also whatever you're put into a garment. And then we're thinking about sustaining the maker and the people around it. So how we are thinking about those. So that's another aspect of achieving sustainability. You might be just focused on that aspect, and you may not be focused on other pieces, because sometimes it's hard to achieve everything. So going step by step is always important. And then the slow product strategy. We have come into an environment where every week we want something new. We cannot put things on social media because I already wore this outfit, so I can't put it again back on my picture. So that becomes hard to, you know. So how we get away from that philosophy and feel good about wearing something for longer time, and keeping that slow motion or slow fashion in perspective, and not going to fast fashion. Fast fashion came more from the the US and other countries, but then now I see that when I come visit India, I always see that some of the fast fashion has gone into, you can buy ready to wear clothing in much cheaper prices, and you can buy a lot, and every time you get new season. So it's like how to make it slow. So in the sustainable design strategy, and I'll be giving some examples of each one of those. So one philosophy is like you deconstruct something, whatever is existing, and you're not buying new fabric, not going shopping. You can deconstruct it and then build it again in a new design. So it's also called recycling, sometimes called upcycling, sometimes downcycling, depending on the state of materials that you have. So if you have you've used it a lot, and now that fabric is no longer useful for perhaps making another garment, then how in India, like we make it rags, like every scrap of fabric we use, like how we mop our floors and everything, we keep reusing. So that's our philosophy anyway, right? That's how we do it in India. But that's not the situation in rest of the world, and there's like a lot of consumption in rest of the world. So but thinking about like when you make your collections, if you're designers and if you are how you're sourcing, so you might be picking up existing collections and then recreating them because to create that new look. Then zero waste is another philosophy where you're designing in a way that you're not wasting any fabric, because a lot of times there's only about 70% to 80% maximum if you have the marker utilization in the industry. So the rest of the fabric goes to waste. And that's a huge cost from the industry perspective, but also then thinking about how we can redesign in a way that we are not wasting, because whatever you're wasting is going into the trash bin, or it's creating more landfill or creating problems for the earth. Then again, thinking from the modular and recyclable, so how you can put things separate and then it can be easy to recycle. So how you build structures and design in a way that you can cut those pieces apart in a modular way that it's easy to, cut it apart. And then another is human-centered design. So you're thinking about a specific need and how you're serving that need. And then all these pieces still have to have good appearance, right? If people will not buy your designs or anybody's or from the industry if they don't have good appearance, they don't fit well, their cost has to be manageable, you can't have a high cost, and they still have to be sustainable from other concepts of using the right fabric, like whether they are natural materials or how you're thinking about sustainability from those. And then they should be reproducible. So you cannot just create something that if somebody wants another of it, unless your design is one of a kind, like no, I cannot make another piece of it. But if another one wants the same design, then it should be reproducible. Or if industry wants to pick up your design, then there should be a way to create that again. And then you could also, in human-centered design, you can embed intelligence so that the say you have a sensor for a patient who is diabetic, as a sensor can tell that whether your sugar is going high and low. So you can have a lot of like your heart rate is going up or down, so you can embed intelligence in a variety of ways. And then you're doing FEA, means is design for function, for emotional satisfaction and aesthetics. So designing FEA, so all those pieces are really still important. When you do sustainable, you cannot let go of all other qualities that we look into a garment. So sustainable, yet so consumer is still looking for those things, right? They're not necessarily looking for just sustainable garment. Majority of the consumers are looking for cost, looking for fit, beauty, and everything. So you have to keep those in mind while you create your sustainable design. So I'm just showing you some of the examples of, this is a reconstruction example from students who just started in the fashion program at my university. So it's like, how they are recreating, or so if you look at the center design, so she created a dress which could also convert into from a long dress to a shorter. You can see how a curtain cloth was repurposed. So they're like, how they're reconstructed pieces. Then this I just did, for my own daughter. So I just thought, okay, I'll put these pictures in. This was this summer project for her, birthday. And I can say India Gate behind, her 18th birthday was in India. And this was a dress from Zara, I think. And then how this was recreated. But it was hard. It took hours. But then, it was more current, and I used every inch of the fabric, so just thinking about like how I can put some pieces in the crotch because that they will not show. So thinking from the design perspective where you are making it that it's not looking bad, right? You have to think mathematically, think carefully about how these pieces, how this geometry will fit into a pattern that can be created. So then this is another one. If some of you might know, Target is a big, mm, retail store here, not only for apparel, but apparel is also a big sector for them. And it's actually headquartered in Minnesota. So it's like we work with Target very closely. Our students go there for internships and we work with them. So this was their hot air balloon for their advertisement, which goes up in the air with the Target sign. Now, once that was pulled down, it was a waste. So now this whole collection was made by different students using that. And it was more about communicating. These fabrics were obviously not very comfortable in every weather, but in the controlled temperature environment, they are still okay to wear, which will not be possible in India to wear such fabrics because these are ripstop waterproof fabrics. So they may not work for that design in Indian context, but they work well here and they look stunning on the runway. But the major part was communicating how somebody's waste can be a design, somebody else's material. So then this is another one, partnering with a local secondhand store. So the secondhand stores have become huge in US. People go and like to buy shop secondhand, which is kind of difficult to do in India because in India, it's secondhand store is more, or store rather than the Bartanwalas come and then we give them our clothes and we buy burtons from them, and then they go and sell those your saris and your pants and to people who cannot afford buying in a store. So it's a different model for different countries. It might be a different models, but we worked with them, and then we picked up from their stores which was not going to be sold because it was not good fit, good design, and then how students recreated to fit their bodies. So you can look at that, even painting them, enhancing those, embellishing those materials. So you can see the stencil printing that student did with it, incorporating leather and things like that from a handbag. So using those things. Then this is another collection if you think about going camping or something. So this is the tent material, which was used. And again, the tent was not functional for a tent because it would not meet the safety standards to work as a tent. So it was a waste. So then how you can make different kind of edgy collection using that material. And again, as I said, it can only work where you have controlled environment, more centralized air conditioning and everything, that these kind of materials can function well in those environments. This is another one. So this was more like you can see rainwear and everything also made from even zippers were used from the tent collection. So everything was repurposed, reused from the tent pieces. And then this, so there's another recycling store which is called Art Scraps. So people who don't need their art materials, they give it to donate it to the store, and then store sells it for cheap prices. And then we go as a team and pick up whatever they want to pick up, and then they create. So actually you can see somebody donated a sari, and this is a dress made out of sari, which was kind of for the students from culturally who may not be aware of sari, but that's how they used it, right? So this one is a zero waste piece. As you can see, all these quotes were from, actually, this was the designer actually. So she did all the collection and wearing one, modeling one for herself. So this is all her patterning, including pockets, everything is coming. So the whole fabric was used in making this collection. So if you really think about, this is just a pattern example of how the zero waste is built up. So you can see different pieces of color. Some of you may have already studied pattern making, some may not. But basically the idea is that if this was a rectangle of material, then how you're utilizing everything and still creating the design. And I'm sure you see that all those jackets that you saw, I would wear any one of them. Like I asked her, can you sell them to me? And she did not sell one to me. She's like, I'm going to wear them myself. Like, I always tend to buy from my students if I really like their design. So creating that aesthetic is really important. And this is another example of, this is called as subtraction cutting. So you just keep being creative and you really don't remove any material out of the garment. So just like you just creatively work on a mannequin and just work around it. So you can create some innovative design, but again, it has to be couture, one of a kind of design here. So this is another one which is zero waste, and again the same designer. She just got too obsessed with the one that you saw with jacket. So you can see that how she pleated this fabric to create that zero waste and created this really cool. You can see she's wearing sort of modest, there's a bodysuit she's wearing under, but that's her design, trying to make it zero waste. Um, and this is another method of thinking zero waste. So you are actually cutting the strips of the fabric and weaving it to create a pattern, right? So there are a variety of ways you can get to the zero waste and be innovative and unique, which is today's consumer is looking for that, right? One of a kind, made to me, and also co-designing with your customer, right? How I want it to look like on me and how creative I can be. Then we also work with 3D printing. Obviously, we don't have too many resources, but it's a very small 3D printer we have. So we work with the student work to make sure that anyone of you have worked with 3D printing. So um, I don't know if you have worked, then you might have realized that when you print something, especially this particular printer is printing PLA, which is bio-based plastic. Uh, so when you print something, if you look at this particular her kind of pyramid that she created to attach on her desk, so the base of it was flat, and then she also built some lights in it. So base of it was flat to make sure that the design does not have extra plastic hanging, because if you don't create a design which is flat, then you have to have extra support so that it can print on it and then it can still build on it. So it's a whole another lecture I can talk about 3D printing. I actually published an article on it. So and you have to accommodate to the design thinking that now I'm not going to create a design that needs some support structure to print. And I can answer any 3D printing questions if anyone has. So to remove those support structures, you have to just plan your design. So then that limits your design, but that's part of design thinking. Like, I won't print something like that, which requires extra plastic. So it's just way of thinking. So when you're trying to embed intelligence, this particular student wanted to, if you look at this hood here, she wanted that hood to, the moment the rain starts, she wanted that hood to open on its own. So that's like, she said, like when I go shopping, so she may not have a car or something to shop, like when she's going to buy her vegetables and everything. So she's coming with bags of vegetables in her hand, and if it starts raining, she wanted the hood to open on its own. Well, we could not provide, we did not have a strong motor for her hood to, open up right away, because you needed a stronger motor and we had limited budget. We had some funding from NASA, but Space Association, NASA is the Space Association. But the other objective she had, that, sometimes it's dark, so the lights should turn on the moment rain, because, there's a cloudy and she needed light. So that did work. So we did test it out. So the moment there was one drop of water on the hood, immediately the lights would turn on, so the sensor was built in. This was another one. She built it for people, for the traffic police. She wanted to build a jacket where they didn't need to pull out a sensor to see if the person who's driving the car has alcohol or like is driving under influence. So this jacket had a sensor right on the arm, so that the moment the driver is pulled, and immediately the sensor tells. So you're trying to help their work become easier, right? So that's like different ways of doing things, and you identify a problem and you do it. So then I'm moving on to the material strategy, how you can think about preferred materials. There's a lot of data available where you can look into what is the environmental impact of each fabric you choose. So when you're thinking about materials, as I said, so not only the fashion fabric or the outside, what you see, but also your linings, your, I'm sure you're putting some kind of fusible interfacing or an interlining in your, so how that is sustainable is whether it is or it is not, right? What kind of other buttons, zippers, labels, whatever you put on the garment, everything should be thought through that material lens. Like, is this like how this will be used and how that will, and what kind of packaging, is it, what kind of hanger it's going on, right? And so you're thinking about all those pieces, and is the how it is being dyed, printed, is the green chemistry of all of this, what kind of processes, like you're de-stressing the denim, like what kind of impact it has. So when you're thinking of the material, you're thinking about every throughout. It's right from the fiber that's grown in the form of the cotton farm. So you think about the pesticides and insecticides used there, how you can have an organic cotton or a cotton that is not using pesticides and insecticides, thinking from right from that processing to how it's woven and knitted or whatever. So like looking through all those pieces, it's really important to see how you can go back to where you're sourcing from and how you can ask those questions from your supplier. It's really important to do that. So then this is just an example of where we used organic cotton. So you can see that this is all, it looks pretty formal, but it is all organic cotton, and it's like a biodegradable fabric, and it was dyed with low impact dyes. So these dyes were also sourced to make sure. So all these colors were actually dyed in the textile center lab here. So, and again, we did whatever we students felt appropriate, and then this whole full collection was put on the runway. So then again, thinking about, I've talked about this, the cultural heritage a bit already, but then also thinking about people who are working in the factory, do they have enough breathing space? Do they have enough ergonomic seating? And are they repeatedly, doing the same action of producing, or you're making sure that they are not fatigued? How much noise pollution you have in the factory or where they're being produced? What kind of water, what kind of, in current COVID situation, what kind of safety measures you're giving them? Because I'm hearing a lot of problems here in Los Angeles, like where factories, everybody got infected and they did not have disinfectant, they did not have soaps, they did not have enough sanitation, that, so they had to close those factories. So what kind of, you're thinking about your worker, whatever, wherever they are, whether they are in the villages and they're doing their craft or they're in a factory setting. So what kind of, you're thinking about the people who are making those clothes. And then fair trade, I was a huge proponent of fair trade, but then a couple months back, I also learned about the cultural heritage piece of it. And then I'm thinking about, how we can empower artisans more than just having that, paying them for what they're making versus giving that ownership and then design, So that's, again, thinking about the people, how we are taking care of their children, how we are taking care of their surroundings, not polluting their environment, just thinking that we don't need to worry about it. So thinking about the dyeing that we do, printing that we do, thinking about all those pieces. So again, asking those questions, keeping that transparency is really important. And then again, these are some of the examples that, this is Rahul Mishra's studio, where these people are working on the embroidery. This is another shoe factory in Noida, where you have enough space and they're thinking already. So there are those examples out there in the country. You just need to source them. So you give your business to the right people, whether you are a designer, so you work for the right people so that your values match their values, or when you source them from a factory or from a artisan group, so making sure you're taking care of them. So that's important. And then again, preserving our block printing heritage, that's like so important, because that's again, encouraging them to use natural dyes and everything versus like, no, I want pigment printing, no, pigment is really harmful. So thinking through that, how you can source them and give them, the business that's more environmentally sustainable and encouraging that. So again, you, with your knowledge and everything, you can ask that and build on their capacity there. Then slow product strategy, obviously long lasting. So building quality and longevity into it, and building that longevity into style, which I also have a suggestion and thinking about, which will come later, about style should not be going in and out like every few months. So you have to build that classic styling, enough room so that if we grow a couple inches on the waist, and which we tend to go without the fast food, we don't cook as much, right? We tend to eat out a lot, go for coffee. So like building that even in the fitting of the garment, just thinking through longevity for a person, or longevity of style, and building that quality so it looks nice by the time I wear it for next 10 years. It should look nice. So I was happy with the fabric that I used from Zara. It wasn't the best, but it still allowed me to make that new garment, and it looked good. And wasn't looking shabby. Although Zara is still a fast fashion company, but their fabrics are still better than H&M, I think, personally. I've already talked about the cultural sustainability. So that's again keeping it slow. When you're making things by hand, you are slowing the process. And that's one of the pieces that Rahul Mishra also talks about, like, how that, moving from hand to hand, that cultural product, which is very important for our Indian economy. So using that cultural, so slowing that process down, and, having that handwork and valuing it. And then as fashion professionals, we can value that. And again, the reuse and resell product as a service. So some of the, I still do not buy so much into the rental business, but use of fly robe is there in India, which you can, many people use it, which is becoming important. So thinking about how we can keep reusing the product, and but again thinking of how we are cleaning it, how we are shipping it, or how we are making sure that there's not carbon footprint left behind because we are reusing and repurposing it or reselling it in some way. And also the cleaning, like, is our dry cleaning or washing, is how sustainable that from the environment perspective. I hope we are not leaving just because fly robe, because I think I have a lot of issues with, when we do a lot of embellishment on the garment, sequins and all those kind of things. So the plastic that comes with it, or if we cannot clean it, we have to just dry clean it. Now, dry cleaning is very harmful unless we use green chemistry. So again, asking those questions, and I have seen that there are green dry cleaners in India now. So again, making sure that we are using the right ones and building that cost into our product. That's important to communicate to the consumer that why it is more expensive, because we are using these chemicals and which are more beneficial to the environment. In the long run, we won't pay the cost what we are paying right now with COVID and everything. Everyone's suffering with it. Okay, Indu, I'm doing okay on
Yes,
time?
yes, I'm
Okay.
perfectly fine. We are
And I'm
on
not
track, and
boring the
that
audience.
no, that's very interesting piece of information that you're sharing with us. So, a
I'll
pretty good
continue.
insight into the sustainability ways that we can definitely adopt. So, moving ahead, my next question to you would be regarding the structure of an economy, how it is. So, if we consider a linear economy, the value of the garment would end when it reaches the consumer. But in case we are considering a circular economy, then the value of the garment would start increasing again when the consumer plans to discard the garment. So, what is your take on that? How do we go about it?
Absolutely. So, kind of moving on to a little bit of circularity, I'm sure I'll try to be quick because I think it is becoming a new thing I talked about, but it's valuable. And I think, as Indu mentioned, once something is getting out of system, is getting waste, it becomes reusable again. So that's how the value that starts. So it's like a new raw material now, right? So that's value starts increasing and put back into the system. But again, we have to build the system. Right now, every fabric, every garment is not cannot do that because we haven't designed it in that way. So design thinking and circularity comes hand in hand. So the the traditional model was we buy some, we buy materials, we make something, use it and dispose, and we just throw it away. And again, in Indian context, this disposal comes like, in a very sustainable way. As I say, like it doesn't just go, which doesn't happen in US. US is like really bad, where it's just disposed of and many people just throw it off into the trash can and it just gets recycled and goes into the landfill and just keeps piling up, and we keep polluting. But as I said, we do it to the scrap, but it still goes, eventually our rags go into the trash can. So thinking about designing the material, so we make it, we use it, we reuse it. how much we can keep it, we can keep, like we keep extending the life of that product. And then when it's ready to dispose of, then we remake and recycle. So we are just putting it back into the system. And in this entire system, it's called closed loop, where nothing is getting wasted. And it just, the way we build that quality in, we have to keep thinking. So we can do that to cotton. But we cannot, at this point, we cannot keep remaking the, the polyester that we use. A lot of people have used soda water, our water bottles to make into the garments, but then those garments cannot be really put back into the cycle again in the same way. So, just keep degrading. So we have to just kind of rethink how we want to build that. And obviously it's not one person's responsibility, it's a team effort, collaboratively, how we think through that. So if we really, this is Ellen MacArthur's, it's right here, that they talk about the circularity. So one, that, we phase out the substances of concern and so whatever the materials that are not right, we phase them out, and we only use materials which can go back into the system again and again and again. So we have to just start thinking of what are those materials that can do that. And then we increase the utilization. So as I said, like repurposing, recycling. Some stores are doing it, some individual designers are doing that. How we can scale it up to make sure that as long as you can wear it. So one, we've talked about longevity, we talked about all these things. And then how we recycle it, how we collect it, and how we can recycle it, including the, if there are any chemicals being used, how they can put recycle back into the system. If you look at about the lensing stencil, so it's a very closed loop production. So they put back all the processes, the chemicals that are used in the processing is recycled back into the next use. So they're not throwing anything out into chemicals into our waterways or anything like that. And again, how the companies are using other renewable forms of energies. So they're not using coal, gas, electric, and all those. So they're using renewable energy in all of this production system. So again, thinking to right from when you look how the stores lit up, what kind of energy they are using. In India, we have so much potential of solar energy. So are we using that? Are we leveraging on that energy or not? Rainwater harvesting, are we using that or not? I remember when I did my master's in Lady Win College was 1988, 89. That was when I did my master's. I remember at that point, one of the seminar project I did was the potential of solar energy in textile processing. So we were thinking it then, so why we have not done it all through? Why we have not thinking through that? Why we are so slow in making those changes? So we have to we have to push it harder, We have to make that change now and pretty quickly. So this is just an example of one of my, this was completed in April, May only. And now actually we work with a company. So this is through the circularity. So the whole model the students had to follow was the circular design thinking. So right from sourcing the fabric, we sourced it where it was all organic, or, they made the decisions. We had to and I'll show you that this is the designer, this is the model. She modeled it because they had to do like with social distancing. So they had to do individual photo shoot with it. And now actually this product was launched by the company. So it's on their website. So they're actually, it was their decision to sell it or not sell it, but they eventually decided to do it. So this is their functional and emotional and aesthetic needs. So the functional needs was that this should be comfortable, it should fit well, it should be breathable and movement, it should be durable and useful, and should also give the protection, sun, wind, cold, and the virus protection. So this was all the design that students thought about, keeping still the fabric was all sustainable, expressing that after wearing that, you feel confident and you feel that I'm protected. So the well-being thought, and then should be also stylish, and it also be all season. So the colors they chose based on what was available. Again, they picked up a company which was selling sustainable materials, but then so the choice of the color of the material was limited. So they picked up the colors that they thought would best for all season use. So then they looked at the technical cycle and smart materials. So it was either bamboo or organic cotton or tencel, and then it did have 2% spandex, which at this point seems like it's okay. Although I know that there's naturally existing stretch material, which is still in the, some of the denim companies are researching it. So, but otherwise, all the sustainable denim also at this point is being made 98%, and there's a 2% that's stretch fiber in it. So it looks like, that is still meeting the standard of circularity, which in my opinion, we need to make it 100%. But right now, that's where we are, because they needed that for the fit on the nose and everything. You need that stretch, which will snug back and not stretch out or not fall down when you're wearing it. And then it had multiple ways to wear it. So this was like they picked up like how you can wear it different ways. And then when they also suggested that consumers, after using it, they can donate it for second life. And they thought that after to remanufacture, it can be cut and then could be remade smaller by, removing whichever parts are not stretched out or something, so kind of reuse it. And then the material is all compostable, most of it 98%, as I said, and including the packaging. So including, they thought about every aspect of it. So the packaging was also sourced like of the sustainable materials, which could be biodegradable. And the design was also reversible, so you could use 2 colors. It was shaped to face, and it was glasses friendly, which means it won't fog your glasses as much based on the fiber and the layers they chose. Design had minimum waste because it was more like a rectangle, and the production was local. That's another piece that we have to start thinking in this COVID environment. And it was a small batch, also on demand manufacturing. However, I recently learned that the owner of the company wants to launch the product on Amazon. And to launch on Amazon, you need, I think, 40 of each design to be able to actually launch your product there. So the Amazon want that kind of inventory to launch it. So then he's asking that if anybody wants to manufacture that, which at this point, when students made it, they made 10 of each kind, So just kind of, but then he wants to launch it because his maximum sales happen on Amazon. So that's kind of, some problems in our system. But 40 is not a huge number, as you all know. Like we about hundreds and thousands versus just 40. But you have to follow whatever Amazon, if you want to sell there and you want to make a business, right? You want to be successful as a business too. So then this is the Ellen MacArthur's jean redesign project, and they're asking for durability, that the denim should last 30 washes, and there should be a clear garment care label, how to take care of the denim. And then we have to educate consumers to read it. I don't know how many of you read the labels. I'm not going to assume anything, but I know that I have to tell my daughters, who are maybe older to you, or because one of them is 28, one is 25, I have to tell them to read the label. They don't necessarily read the label. So reading it and making sure that you're washing in the right temperature and you're washing, and in India, we still tend to use the machines which are, and we still hang dry them, but some of other countries may not be hang drying them. So again, so that's the push here, is to hang dry your clothes so that you're not wasting that energy and everything. And then recyclability, as I already mentioned at this point, 98% cellulosic material. They're also talking about eliminating the rivets, so that easy to disassemble, because if whatever metal you're using, it's hard to then remove it. So thinking about how you can eliminate that and use some material that looks like that, give you the same aesthetics. And then also traceability and meeting the guidelines. So how you're meeting should be very transparent. That's the next, everything should be very clear and open, should not hide anything. So you should be, whatever it is, it doesn't matter if you're not meeting the full sustainability. As long as it's transparent and clear, and you have a clear goal of improving it, that's okay to do that, and be bold to do that. Then there's the KG Fabrics in India. I think they have a lot of good options for green denim. There are 3 different options, and the most sustainable is the Nature's Blue. So you should look into that and look at what kind of model they are following. And then this is Navina's is another one. So they do have, so KGB is still working on it, and Navina has an example where they have natural stretch material that they're planning to use in their denim. It's from Pakistan. So, all right. So I think those are my circularity. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does very well answer my question. And just to add on, Dr. Anupma, I would like to share that some of our students were working on this project of sustainable development sometime back and
You
working on
froze
this
in the.
concept of circularity also. So I'm sure this information would be very, very beneficial for these students because that is an ongoing project right now. And I didn't want to interrupt you in between earlier. There was a group of students who was working on this 3D printing also. Last year, I believe there was a group of students who were working on this project. So I hope they are watching this because we had invited our alumni also to watch the session today. So that was wonderful. And moving on, Anupama ma'am, I would
And
want
can
to
I say
know.
one thing before we move on?
Yes,
So
please.
anybody who wants to connect on those individual pieces, my email would be at the end. I'm more than happy because I think more we talk and share knowledge and share each other's. I'm sure I have things to learn from you. When you did your circularity, what did you learn from? Because I learned many things when my students were working on it. So I think sharing that information and knowledge is so important. So anybody with 3D printing or circularity, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to connect with you and answer any questions and learn from you. Yeah.
Absolutely. That would be wonderful to share notes on it and mutually learn from each other. So, Anupama ma'am, moving ahead, I would want you to comment something on what is the scope of the sustainable products because everybody will look around and
Well, am I losing you or everyone's
especially
losing her? Indu, you're echoing and I did
class
not
of
hear the last part
population
of your
who probably
question.
can. Am I audible now? Is it better now?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, one sec.
So I did not hear your
Am I
last
better
part
now?
of the
Am I?
question. You,
Okay, I'll repeat that. I'll repeat
yeah,
that.
yeah, last part.
So I wanted to know that considering this fact that the class of people probably who cannot afford this kind of a product there. So what do you foresee? What is the scope of the product, sustainable product there?
Okay, I think I would answer some of you with what you were asking here, and then I think some of it might come later also. But I think the scope is unlimited, as I listed here. So I really like this graphic I recently found on LinkedIn. It's by Corporate Rebels, and I think that's the trend. Okay, so you have to really watch. The trends are really important to see. So from the profit, you're going into the value and purpose. So having, if you are thinking about being an entrepreneur, small startup, thinking about value based, because that's what consumer wants and that's what's relevant in today's world. Also networking of teams. So you're thinking about more like collaborative teamwork. So that's really important. Uh, Very supportive leadership model, not
Mhm.
directive, because as I said, I can learn from you, you can learn from me, and all of us brainstorm together. And then you cannot just predict anything. Like the COVID came to us from nowhere, right? So we cannot just plan things because of where we are today in the world. We have to just adapt quickly. So having that agility to be able to adapt quickly is really important. We are able to quickly experiment and quickly move on to adapt to the new, whatever is the new thing. So building that into when you build your own company or brands, and then don't try to control it. Build, learn to build trust. Trust is very important. Once you trust someone and give them the freedom and give them that power, but stay firm to with you. You have this shared values, you have the teamwork, but then having that trust is really important, because without trust you won't be able to move on. And then having that distributive decision making and not have that authority. I think that distribution of not only the resources, so we have to make sure that our economy is distributive. Everybody gets the equal benefit of what we are working on, as I've talked before, and not these top brands making those top bucks and all the other people are struggling right now. So we want to make sure. And then again, transparency, as I've already mentioned, that's really important. Don't be secret, then people will not trust you. That trust will come from radical transparency. And as I said, it's okay to be not perfect. Nobody's perfect. So we have the scope to build or grow. If we have the right values in place, we can grow our businesses. But then we have to be transparent about it. And then, so instead of having the job description like this is what I want, you want to just talk about what talent people can bring into, and that's how we can be innovative. So you can think into the new system, be innovative into the future if you let that opportunity bring people into that opportunity. So then the scope is obviously in the sustainable product is that's the time for applied empathy. You do based on what your consumer or what the person of your user. I also don't like the term consumer because that talks about consumption, which I'm anti. I'm more about mindful consumption. So the user, so that empathy that you have, you're thinking from their lens. And then we talked about the 4 dimensions of when we talk about 23 sustainable development dimensions about the people, planet, and profit, but also the culture. So thinking about applying to all 4 dimensions. Purposeful, we've talked about that, has to be functional and flexible, agility, and has regenerative influence. So, we have like our products can, what we do now can make our world better place. So we can reduce our carbon budgets, we can contribute, we can reduce the contribution to global warming, because if we don't change that, we are in for more pandemics, more widespread diseases. If we keep having that global warming at this rate what it's going on, we have to reduce it. It's in our hands to do it, and we can do that. And again, distributed for equity, so we have the power to elevate the poverty from globally, so that we can make the distribution of assets and profits and everything is done. So this is the time. It's like, almost like thinking what we have done is not good and how we can make it. It's okay to realize it now. Like, this COVID was like a cold water on our face, like, especially in a winter morning, like if you get that cold water, you know, I remember doing that as a, what was like Cub Scouts. I was in college and we went for hiking and we went to Nainital and we had to take cold water showers. So like the feeling, I still remember that on my face, like that shock that you get. So kind of again thinking about the scope we have. So first of all, thinking about, and I think this was one of your questions also. Can I continue with it,
Yes,
Indu?
yes, yes, sure,
Okay.
ma'am, you can.
So
Because
the
this was
new
something that, yeah, we wanted to know about the implications in the post-pandemic era also, how things would be like, what would be the new kind of situations that we would be in. Because COVID has definitely turned the world upside down for everyone.
exactly,
But
exactly,
adaptability, as you mentioned earlier, is the key here. So quick to adapt,
absolutely.
swift to adapt, that only can probably make someone a success in this situation.
Absolutely. So yeah, but then post, as you mentioned, that it just turned our world upside down. So suddenly, the sustainability did become a back burner for, so just give a setback to companies were moving towards that goal, but then suddenly they were losing, they could not continue with their orders, and which was again, the fashion revolution is pushing companies to go ahead and pay their suppliers. Things were already in production, but then it did put to some extent to the back burner. But then at the same time, there was a readiness because we were seeing the pandemic happening, and that was suddenly a realization of why this is happening around us, like what's happening. So there's a readiness because of the pandemic, and now the pandemic situation brought those supply chain issues, like when you're supplying from one country or the other, and then now suddenly you don't get that supply. So thinking about, and I'm going to talk about that in, when we go down, and that urgency because of our actions, what has happened. So I think that urgency has created that awareness about, like, no, we have to change. Now this is the time where industry can get into that radical change that needs to happen to make it in future sustainable, to continue. So not face, right now we are seeing all the problems that are happening, right? The demand is low, the product is not going through, the orders are canceled, our workers are out of jobs and things like that. So if we cannot learn from this, then we are not humans, so we have to learn from this situation. So but the consumer demand otherwise for sustainable fashion was high from, it has tripled from 2016 to 2019. uh, and but then, as you can, I'm going to talk about this in a bit, but in 2020, we have to still see that how that sustainable fashion is, that demand going up. That data is yet not out because, they're still researching that, but it might have gone a little bit down because the overall demand has gone down, right? But it will still go, it's going to go back up because we are seeing that's happening in China now, that the demand is kind of going back because they are getting back to normal.
Mhm.
In other places, it's still people are keeping their budgets tight and they're skeptical. They may not have the need because they're not going out. So the demand can go up a little bit later. So, we have to sustain ourselves for next few months. So consumer is expecting now that kind of, like you talked about, the transparency, and they were expecting that sustainability though, because their minds are getting ready to it and they're looking at what COVID has done and why. So we have to, some have realized and some haven't. So that, and then transparency I've already mentioned. We also need to have built better consumer connection, so that one-on-one connection, that's also becoming important. So post COVID, the new model would be that on-demand manufacturing, trying to reduce the seasons, or go seasonless, so that you have that product available to the consumer and not summer versus, in India it's more relevant from the perspective of functionality actually, because the fabrics that work in summer do not work in winter. But in US it's a difference, more about the change, about the season, like, so there are different dimensions to it based, again, and I'm just comparing these two countries because I'm here, but then every country would have its little nuances around what's relevant in their context. So again, thinking about how you can go seasonless. Can you go seasonless in India or no? Because of, maybe you cannot go seasonless, so but have reduced seasons, right? Producing local, trying to produce be closer so that these kind of supply chain issues don't happen. Like you can still, you have your product because it's close to where the consumer is. So thinking local, but then that would also hinder between the expertise and the materials that have global expertise and a regional expertise. You may not be able to source them in another part. So that kind of, that global supply chain would have some impact on it. But like keeping local for more staples, but keeping global for more one of a kind, thinking through how you can have two different products, and making sure that you are not impacting your supply chain, and also diversifying the suppliers. So not depending on one, but giving business to different suppliers. A lot of it is going online, as you can see that everything was declining, even online sales declined. But in general, as compared to walking into a store versus online, did go up. So I think, and many companies had to quickly shift to that online, that to, even if they were not thinking online, they had to move online, because otherwise if you start losing your customer because you cannot provide them online, then you are losing them, because then customer will move on to someone else. There's enough product, enough people in the market, so you have to stay current, stay relate to your customer. The other piece is, like, from the industry perspective, the digital technologies going omni-channel, providing that, and then 3D, which means that you are able to provide 3D simulations and you don't need to go into sample making multiple times. You're trying to reduce the waste. So this is the time to adopt those technologies like virtual sampling and virtual fitting. So going into those kind of, product life management technologies. So going digital is really important, because that way you are reducing that travel cost, you're reducing all kind of carbon footprint that you had. However, there's a disclaimer here that I don't know at this point of time, when you're using the computers, how much energy is being used in the usage of computers, because that's another aspect. I don't think there's any comparison, at least I'm not aware of any comparison of flying versus, traveling versus sample making versus using the computer. Say earlier, only 10 people were using the PLM software or the 3D software. Now 100 people are using it. Now, what is the electrical and the carbon, like whatever is being used as the energy source, or are you using the renewable energy source? So if you are, then it's a different story. So thinking about those things, also thinking about your companies, if you're establishing those values ahead, that I'm only going to use so and so renewable energy. Why not? Then you can go ahead and use whatever technology you want to use, because we do not have these actual numbers about how to compare these things, which one has more impact, which one has less impact. So I think, right from the design perspective, from building that, your brand perspective, if you think about all those pieces ahead of time, then you're already making steps ahead of anyone else. So that's important. And then again, innovation, as I said, bringing all the talent in, so you will be more innovative and you'll have more solutions into, and then we do have many brands have created targets, and they have earlier they were not so vocal about them, but I'm seeing that, say H&M has a target of 2025, all stuff will be organic and things like that. So those targets, and so they are making that change. And as I told you, they're making change not only because they're feeling the need, but it's a right business decision for them to even connect to their consumer. So consumer is asking those questions, although we still have to mobilize more consumers. So there are many initiatives, like, good on you scores the brands. I don't know how accurate they are, but fairly based on, I've looked at their methodology, so looks pretty decent. I really like them. So if you are thinking it's an app too, and again, the relevance would be more in the US, because I don't know if every brand from India is there or not, but somebody can build that if it's not there. I really like what Fashion Revolution is pushing the brands to make those changes, especially from the social responsibility. Sustainable Apparel Coalition is industry group that's mobilizing from the sourcing perspective. So it's asking, you can actually score your vendors that if they are what are changes they are making. So you score yourself using Higg Index, which is an index of your environmental and social responsibility, recycling. There are different kind of standards in there, and you score it. So your performance, if today you get 50 out of 100 points, so you can aim for next year. My goal is to make 55, 60. So how you make those changes based on your brand values, right? So those, and again, for smaller companies, it's a little expensive to subscribe to these. But again, if you're building that in your cost structure already and being transparent about it, it's okay to do that. Then everyone talks about Copenhagen Fashion Agenda. I think it's a huge presence, and a lot of celebrities participate in it. So it has, but again, it has more presence in Europe as compared to US, but then, Europe is our leader anyway. If you think about sustainability and compare to Western countries, Europe versus US, Europe is definitely leading it. I like Cotton Incorporated also. They do a lot of research and sustainability, and they talk about, obviously, they're promoting cotton as a fiber. So then again, I like that. And Textile Exchange is another one, talking about they created a list of preferred fibers. Textile Genesis is actually, they have, again, offices in different countries, but it's, uh, about, it's, I think Gurgaon, I think, has one of the offices, and they are actually using technology for traceability. So if any brand can hire their services and have these blockchain that you talk about, it's kind of hard to wrap my head around the blockchain, but, I think that's how you can trace. So you have where the fiber is coming from. So the Textile Genesis is really like one of you who did their research and work, and they got funded by innovation fund, and now they have that money into. So but then they are something, traceability is really good. I have some example. Then there are labels that are trying to claim, third party or not third party, but there are a lot of labels that can convince the consumer about the product. Just Style is another one that evaluates what's happening and gives you a lot of. And then I also like the cultural intellectual property rights, because that's an aspect that's not yet widespread. And I want all of you to think through, especially if you're using artisans in your work. So I think that's something you want to think about from the sustainability perspective. It's really important, and very important from me, because I have always loved artisan work from India. It's just that value I learned in my undergrad, and I think I hope I build that into my students as well, like how we would respect that work. So these are some of, you have so many labels and how to trust them. And then I think the new label will be about safety, like how things can be, oh, this is virus safe and this is pandemic safe. And I think those would be the new labels that will be coming to sustain you as an individual, sustaining yourself, right? You are not prone to disease. So not only sustaining the environment, but sustaining yourself. And then, as I said, like there are so many, and how consumer will trust those would be more about the third party certification versus self-declaring claims, because it's hard to trust those self-declaring claims. Like, I tell this is how, but would you believe it or not? But if a third party certifying, or you're following ISO standards, that's when, that becomes. So it's something about thinking about, if you want to build that trust into your consumers, using certifying yourself would be something to consider as well. or using company like getting certified and using a third party to do your traceability, like I talked about Textile Genesis. So what needs to be done? So that could lead into your next question about media, Indu. So
Yes, definitely, because what is being projected by the media definitely affects a lot. So, how the media probably can contribute or can guide the consumers about the sustainability part to be adopted by the consumers. So, what ideally should be done by the press or by the media there? That's my
yeah,
next
absolutely.
question.
Yeah, and so that's like, I think I've tried to list all the stakeholders in
Mhm.
on this slide. So media is obviously the top one because 80% of the problems are solved or created by media in our society because they have a lot of power and in all formats. So if you look at the consumer studies, there's like a 30% search online, 30% read print media, 30%, go in that. So there's like, uh, distributed all over. So media to promote the right things. So media has a huge role. I think they have a huge responsibility because our mindsets, our cultural mindset is shaped by media. And what we see here repeatedly is what we are going to remember more, whether we are listening numbers or we are looking about sustainability. And so media has a huge role to play. And I through this presentation, I request media to take on even a stronger role. And I see that a lot of media is, if you look at work business, they have sustainable. So everybody's doing their part, but even doing more, so because they can leverage on their power. And we, from our social media, can leverage on our power too. If we all started communicating sustainability through our social media networks. So think about that ripple effect, like, when they explain the COVID, how that spread, the same thing, we can spread the message through of our sustainability through that. If I influence, say, 400 people in my network and those 400 people do further down, so just there's a huge power in our personal social media and actually the press, the media. So all formats need to communicate that message. If we realize it and we strongly believe in it, passionate about it, we can make that change through our network. Then also media needs some material. So the celebrities and other influencers also need to promote that, and they need to work in team here, because a lot of the moments we look up to a celebrity, and if they are communicating that they are wearing sustainable fashion and talking about it, think about the green carpet red dress, so think about that, and then how that is influencing us. So using those social media influencers, if you know have them promote social sustainable fashion, sustainable designs, and circular design, we can do that. All the nonprofits and NGOs have a role to play because they do that activism part that nobody else can do. So they have to continue pushing, and they're doing it, and they continue, and we keep supporting them. Government has to put policies in place. I think that's really important. And I know that some governments, some of our leaders are not thinking. I'm not going to name anyone, and but some leaders are thinking, and it's interesting to see that women leaders think better than male leaders. So that's the women power. I'm sorry for the attendees who are male. I'm not going against you, but I'm just saying in general, if you look at even the crisis of the COVID, you will see the countries that have women leaders have done better than countries that have uh, men as leaders. It's just that how the female brain thinks differently, more circular versus male brain thinks. So that's biology, anatomy. That male thinks brain thinks more linear, but everybody is not same. So please, no offense to anyone, we all are different. We might be thinking indifferently. So the government has to put policies in place, and they have to put right incentives and put the tax on non-sustainable and reduce the tax on you know things that are sustainable. So their taxing system that goes into the costing should be addressed from the government end, and investors who put money into the businesses have to put money into sustainable businesses. And I think it's happening, but more investors, if they can do that. So investors have a role to play. Industry, 60% have some practices in place. um, but again, they need to move quicker, and then the rest of the 40% who are not yet doing it have to join in quickly. So that's important. So the 60% who are doing it, they have systems in place, so they just need to make it more intense and faster. As I said, we are behind. We need to do it yesterday. And then consumers, so only 16%, the data says, and it can be again limitation of how the data was collected, 60% are fully committed to it, like they will not buy anything else. And 20%, 25% are not a lot interested. So, but then there are rest of are like in between. So how we can push those in betweens towards more sustainable, and how people who are 25% who are not interested, they're still significant, right? How we can make them sure that they care. They're not caring yet at this point of time. But then there's a lot of middle ground here. So you're looking at about 60% right in the middle here, 59%, who are in different spectrum of the middle. Some are more, some are less. They're different levels, which I think you can find something on the Just Style or somewhere. You can find and even good on you. So they would have. So we need to communicate that and educate them. And then obviously academia, like people like me have to teach the young professionals, and I'm sure all of your professors are thinking through that too, and how we are communicating that in the classroom situation. And even doing it in the early on, as a, when the kindergarten to, to primary, pre-primary and schools, how we are embedding that kind of sustainable thinking is just like how we want to keep cities clean, how we want to just is it like a common sense value that we want to embed into our teaching, and right from the early childhood. So that's really important. And things are happening. You can see there are materials, there are books and games and toys which are made from those materials, and but then how we can escalate that, how we can scale that to, so that this is not only 16%, it's going more. Because unless we consumers demand that, and we as an employers demand that from our companies, I think that's also, consumer is a driver, but at the same time, people from within the company also need to ask that question. So we all can be the drivers of change. So any other questions, Indu? Did I answer that?
Yes. I would take up a last question for you, but that's going to be very, very important from the students' perspective, because a lot of students here who are there with us in the meeting also and on YouTube also watching us would want to probably venture into entrepreneurship at a later stage once they pass out of college. So, what is your suggestion to them in terms of what business model they should have as a startup? And with respect to sustainability, of course, so what factors should they consider and how should they be starting up as an entrepreneurial venture?
Sure. So I will just kind of, before I move on here, I want to just remember the trends that I showed you, and then the scope that I showed you. So you have to think of all those things, and different strategies that are there. So now I'm going to talk about, so first of all, you want to start with creating what's your mission and vision. Why are you? Who are you and why? It's really important for you to define why you want to do this. Okay. And in that process of why, that will be your mission, and what you want to accomplish would be your vision. And you want to make sure that you define your values. Now, when you're defining your values, and kind of, when you go back to the second last bullet, when you establish your values, you could start with 2-3 sustainability related goals, or you can go all out. So if your value is that I'm going to be 100% sustainable, what does that mean? So you'll have to clearly define, does it mean just the environmental sustainability, or does it mean social sustainability? Does it mean both? So, and it doesn't, it's okay to pick one, because each one of us have different resources, different life situations, different contexts. So it's okay to start with, it doesn't hurt to start when you're starting as a startup, starting with smaller, footprint of having 2-3 values. And then you want to have a roadmap of how you want to constantly improve, but always stay true to yourself and be authentic. So that transparency, which I've already mentioned earlier, but stay authentic. Don't try to be someone else, or don't build your company around something, oh, this is cool. If you don't feel that's cool, don't do it. do if you personally inside feel that that's a good way to go. When you believe it in personally, that's when you want to do it. So make sure that you're true to yourself. Another thing it's important is to identify your niche. So when you're going into, and again, your niche could be one aspect of sustainability or 100% sustainable, and then tell your story nicely. Story is really important to the consumer. So one, identifying the niche is also important, because there's like, if I have to buy a dress, there are 10,000 companies available for me to buy it. So why I should buy from you? So you have to identify what you are doing that's different than others, how you are different, and then differentiation should happen from the sustainability lens, in my opinion, at this point of time when you're thinking, so how you are, and then building on it. As I said, so you have this, say, current three values that you have, that I'm going to only sustainably source materials, I'm going to only build from these. And then and when you're asking those companies, and say you're asking a company, I'm going to, are you using renewable energy or not, and selecting your factor. So just, you have to just like, it takes a lot of effort to identify what's valuable to you, and then check mark, I can do this or I cannot do this. And again, don't feel bad for not being able to do something. Feel bad in a way that you can do it next time, in the next year, next, lay out your plan for next 10 years, how you can accomplish things. So I think within next 5 to 10 years, make sure that you can do everything, but you don't need to start all out, because that's really hard. Because when I did my collection, to make that fully sustainable, I was pulling my hair apart to like get all the fabrics, all the thread I wanted to sew, you know. So I wanted to make sure my thread is, and then if I'm not using interfacing, how am I making my jacket, how I'm structuring that, because there was no till today there's no interfacing really available that's sustainable yet. But I just saw that Waikiki zipper company has just launched there. They are reusing the plastic from oceans. So companies can do it once they put the innovation. So now I know what kind of zipper I can source. But then at that point, I had to source what was available, right? So it was really hard to do that. But then at the end, it's like a satisfaction that, that you get out of the product, because I felt passionately about it, because I wanted to make sure that I'm doing everything right here. And since I was making my own, so I didn't need to source production, uh, but that would be a case if you're trying to just design and sourcing production somewhere else. And then and then, as I said, telling your story is so important. So if you don't know how to tell your story, hire someone. Putting that money into telling your story is important. And then also establish your uh, advisory board. So if you are into apparel, or you're into a handbag, whichever business you are in, and whatever your values are, based on these values, you want to have experts in the field that can advise you on that. They can advise you on the kind of materials. If you're looking into, I want to only use cotton, or I only want to use the polyester, then see people who are expert in that field and use those as your network of people who can help you advise. A lot of sustainability advisors don't charge you anything. They try to do it in kind, pro bono. But sometimes it's okay to pay if you have to pay. But normally, if you're making an advisory board, you are not necessarily paying them. So, but then you do need those experts to help you guide through the process. So, and you can also reach out to, academia. There are a lot of people who would be more than willing, because their value is to make sure the entire supply chain and apparel industry is sustainable. So they will do it. And I've been doing it for a couple of brands. So you would do it if people reach out to you. So that's kind of like, these are some of, they're not all, but there's some of the books in my collection. But I just added a couple more. I just bought a new one. Yeah. So is there anything you want to expand into on what they can do?
I think, Dr. Anupama, that was a wonderful piece of advice and very crystal clear, bulleted piece of advice that you've mentioned in your last slide when the students are going to plan their startups. And very grounded piece of advice also, because these are the pointers I'm sure they should be considering when they are planning their startups. Also, to mention here that JDNs, you can definitely start planning that out, and don't be worried about or be apprehensive about this temporary phase that we all are going through. I'm sure we're gonna soon have some sort of respite from that, and things are gonna be back to normal once again, back to the old normal rather than this new normal that we are going through. And I think clothing being something which is one of the basic needs of humankind, as Anupama ma'am also mentioned in the beginning. So it is something which is going to be there, not going to be obsolete at all. So we are in a trade, in an industry which is going to be there till the time humankind exists on planet Earth. So I'm sure we all can be hopeful of that and can start planning our ventures and planning our futures ahead. And we do have people like Anupama ma'am with us to guide us through at every step. And I'm sure, ma'am, if any student has any query, can get back to you for that in case someone has a
Absolutely.
query. So, students, you can definitely take a note of the email ID that ma'am has posted here, and you can definitely get back to me or Bhavna ma'am also in case you have any sort of query at a later stage as well. We would be glad to help you out. And Anupama ma'am, that was such a wonderful session that we had. And I would just request a minute more from your precious time so we can probably have a good picture with all our students also and with you to have a memory of the session, of this wonderful
Sure.
session. So I would request all my wonderful JDNs also to just switch on your videos in case it is off. Have a good smile there, and we will click a picture on a count of three. So be ready with that. So here we go on a count of three. So 1, 2, 3, and we go. Thank you so much. That was really, really wonderful, and it's our absolute pleasure to host you here today. It was lovely hearing you and your opinions about sustainability. I'm sure students have learned a lot today. So thank you so much once again, Anupama ma'am, on behalf of the entire team of JD Institute. It was really lovely having you here today.
Thank you, Indu. You were a fabulous moderator. And before you went, are there any questions that I need to answer from students?
Uh, Students, you can, in case you want to, though we've given your email ID, and in case they would have, they can definitely forward it to us. I'm sure it can be forwarded to you at a later stage also, because some of them are there with us on, in fact majority is there with us on YouTube,
Okay,
and
got
they
it.
are watching you there. So meeting, I have a little lesser strength. YouTube, it is more strength there, so I'm expecting more questions to come from there, and we can definitely compile it up and send it across. So
Okay, thank you for all of you who are here in person. I can see some of your lovely faces. So thank you. It was good to see some of the faces because my Zoom is only showing me like 6 people at a time here. So yeah.
okay, so we can all
Okay.
actually have all of them in a grid there in one
Yeah. I
screen
put the
also.
grid, but yeah, my grid isn't working as your grid.
Not a
But I'll see
problem
it
there.
eventually, right? So it's okay. Yeah.
Sure, ma'am. It was really lovely having you here
Yeah.
today.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. You have a good rest of your evening. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.